Bell peppers? Collards? At his age. Officer Kershaw scoffed. Old black man handing out bags on the corner? That's drug distribution in my book. No warning. No backup. Just a patrol dog and a setup. He planted cocaine in a veteran's garden. Then ordered his K-9 to attack him. What he didn't know was that the man he was trying to arrest had trained military scout dogs in Vietnam, and the dog standing in front of him was a descendant of one of them. One whistle, one command, and everything flipped. The attacker froze. The dog refused. And the whole town watched justice take root. Right there in the dirt. Which state are you watching from? Do dogs still remember what humans forget? Stay with us, because this story doesn't end in handcuffs. It ends with a garden, and a medal 50 years overdue. Every morning, just before the sun rose over Mill Haven, South Carolina, Curtis Elwood Harper was already up. At 72, his body moved with the slow precision of a man who'd learned to make pain wait its turn. 30 years in the Marines had carved discipline into his bones. Some habits didn't retire, even when he did. Curtis lived alone in a modest one-bedroom house on the east side of town. The part folks didn't put on postcards. His walls were lined with more than memories. A folded American flag in a glass case, a faded photo of his unit in Da Nang, and a yellowing picture of his late wife, Nora, holding their daughter and grandson on her lap. The kind of photo that pulled something tender out of him every time he passed it. He still made his coffee in the same dented tin percolator he'd carried through Okinawa, toasted one slice of wheat bread, sat in his chair by the window, read the Mill Haven Daily, yesterday's copy, left on the porch by Miss Dottie next door. Curtis never complained. He liked things one day behind. Gave the world time to settle. By 6:30, he was out the door, dressed in worn denim overalls and a long-sleeve flannel, cane in one hand and canvas tote in the other. The limp in his left leg had never gone away, not since shrapnel tore through it outside Hugh in 71. Cold mornings made it worse, but he still walked the 8 blocks to Dobbins Lane Garden like he had somewhere to be, because he did. The garden wasn't much to outsiders, just a fenced-in quarter-acre off a cracked sidewalk. But Curtis had turned that forgotten patch of land into something sacred. Collard, tomatoes, bell peppers, okra, what he couldn't carry home, he gave away to neighbors. What they didn't eat, they canned together at the rec center on Saturdays. For him, it wasn't just vegetables. It was a mission, a fight without bullets. He checked the rows each morning like a sergeant reviewing troops. Soil damp, no sign of beetles. Young squash coming up strong. His hands, gnarled and dark, moved like they still remembered something urgent. Maybe they did. The world around the garden hadn't changed much since Curtis returned home from Vietnam. Not really. Cops still drove slower through his neighborhood. Potholes still outlived promises. Store clerks still watched his hands more than his eyes. East Mill Haven might as well have been on another map. Curtis didn't talk about justice anymore. He planted it, watered it, gave it away in brown paper sacks. This morning, he paused at the gate and looked back down Dobbins Lane. The sun was peeking through the moss-covered oaks, lighting up the porch of Miss Dottie's house. He tipped his cap. She waved her broom in reply. He smiled. In the distance, a police cruiser rolled past. Slow, watching. Curtis didn't look away. He just stepped into the garden and let the gate creak shut behind him, because some men serve once. Others, like Curtis Harper, never stop. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed high over Mill Haven, baking the sidewalks and drawing a shimmer off the hood of a black SUV that pulled up to the police station. Inside, Chief Mason Trillman adjusted his collar, smoothed the crease in his sleeve, and stepped into the squad room like he owned every inch of it. He kinda did. Trillman had been brought in 6 months ago from Atlanta. The mayor called it a modernization move. Most folks in East Mill Haven called it something else. His reputation followed him. Clean-cut, hard-nosed, believed in metrics and broken windows. He didn't smile much. Said it looked weak. The briefing room lights buzzed overhead as officers filed in. Trillman tapped the edge of the podium. The room hushed. Directive Sentinel goes live this week. he said, voice firm, eyes scanning the room like a drill instructor. "You've been briefed. Now it's boots on pavement." Maps appeared on the screens behind him. Red zones, blue zones. The red zones weren't labeled, but everybody knew what they meant. East Millhaven, black neighborhoods, low-income housing, Curtis Harper Street, his garden. "These areas are where we focus," Truman continued. "Low-visibility crimes, loitering, code violations, noise complaints. We respond fast. We respond firm. We take back control." A few officers nodded. Some didn't. Down front, Officer Landon Kershaw grinned like he'd just been handed a gift. At 36, he looked like a poster boy for a recruitment ad. Square jaw, blue eyes, and a temper he didn't bother hiding. His file was thick with civilian complaints, but none had stuck. Trillman saw him as effective. After the meeting, Kershaw cornered Trillman in the hallway. "Assign me to Sector 4, he said. "I've been working with the K-9 Titan. Dog sharp. Got a nose like radar." Trillman hesitated. "That shepherd's got a spotty record." "Titan respects me," Kershaw replied. "An AK-9 team patrolling East Millhaven sends a message." Trillman folded his arms. "Everything by the book." Kershaw gave a half-smile. "Always." That same afternoon, Curtis wiped sweat from his brow. Still crouched in the tomato row. The sun had turned relentless, but he moved slow and steady. Behind him, he heard a sound he didn't like. A police cruiser, idling, watching. He stood, stretched his back, and stared through the fence. 2 officers inside, one with mirrored sunglasses, the other taking notes. Then they drove off. Not fast, not slow, just enough to be noticed. Curtis felt it in his chest. Not fear, not anger, something older. That quiet signal your body sends when it's been through enough to recognize trouble before it knocks. Later that night, Kendra Monroe called. She was organizing a community meeting. Concerns about stepped-up enforcement, increased patrols, citations for nonsense like trash bins left out or music too loud. "They're starting something," she said, "and it's got Trillman's name all over it." Curtis didn't answer right away. He looked out his window, across the dark yard, toward Dobbins' Lane Garden. "I'll be there," he said finally, because he'd seen this playbook before. Only now they gave a new name. By the time Friday evening rolled around, the chairs inside Millhaven Town Hall were packed. The front row buzzed with stiff blazers, city officials, and department brass. The back row, folding chairs brought in last minute, was where East Millhaven sat, and stood, and waited. Curtis Elwood Harper hadn't worn a tie in 20 years. That night, he buttoned his shirt all the way up and clipped on a navy blue one that used to belong to his late son-in-law. Devin drove him there, one hand on the wheel, the other thumbing through flashcards. "You don't need notes, Grandpa. Just speak your truth." Curtis gave a dry chuckle. "Son, speaking truth is what got me into trouble most of my life." Devin grinned. "Then tonight, let's get into some more." Mayor Russell Van Ney called the meeting to order with a gavel tap that sounded more nervous than official. A slideshow began, pie charts, crime maps, and bold words like community safety realignment. It all sounded clean, calculated. Then Chief Mason Trillman took the floor. "Directive Sentinel is about prevention," he declared. "About restoring pride in our neighborhoods. Enforcement equals investment. We're not targeting, we're protecting." People shifted in their seats. Then the mic opened for public comment. Curtis stood up slowly, cane in one hand, Devin steadying his elbow. He walked to the front, every eye following. His service pin gleamed faintly on his chest. "My name is Curtis Harper," he said into the mic. "I served this country for 30 years in the United States Marine Corps. 2 tours in Vietnam. I've lived in Millhaven most of my life, long enough to know what words like sentinel and realignment are trying to cover up." A few quiet murmurs echoed through the crowd. "You say enforcement equals investment," Curtis continued, "but the only thing being invested in East Millhaven lately is fear. Patrol cars sitting on corners like vultures. Young boys stop for walking too slow. Elderly folks fined for having a cracked driveway. Chief Trillman crosses arms, jaw locked tight. I built a garden on Dobbins Lane. Curtis said, with my hands, my knees, my own money. That land feeds over 20 families. And just last week, I got watched by 2 of your officers like I was running a cartel out of my collards. Some folks chuckled. Curtis didn't. This ain't about law and order. This is about lines where you draw M and who you put on the wrong side. And I've seen this before. Different uniforms. Same playbook. He stepped back. You want pride in the neighborhoods? Try showing them some damn respect first. The room went still. Trillman stepped forward, voice syrupy with fake deference. With all due respect to Mr. Harper's service, anecdotal grievances don't replace facts. If certain communities draw more attention, perhaps it's because they demand more enforcement. The crowd bristled. Someone muttered, "That's bull." Another stood to clap. The meeting spiraled, voices rising, hands pointing, truths clashing with spin. When it finally ended, Devin helped Curtis back to the car. "Think you made a dent?" he asked. Curtis looked back at Town Hall, lights flickering behind the glass. "I didn't come to make a dent," he said. "I came to show them we still got a backbone." The next morning, the smell hit Curtis before he even reached the gate. Fertilizer, but not the good kind. Sour, rotten, artificial. He turned the corner onto Dobbins Lane and stopped cold. The garden was wrecked. Tomato stakes snapped in half. Ochre beds flattened into muddy scars. The irrigation hoses, cut clean through, hacked like someone enjoyed it. And in the center of the chaos, a plastic bag of dog kibble had been dumped and set on fire, its ashes still smoldering in the breeze. Curtis clenched his jaw. Not a word passed his lips. But something deep behind his eyes shifted. Not surprise. Not sadness. Recognition. He stepped through the ruined gate, his boots crunching over broken squash. At the far edge of the plot, someone had driven over the compost barrels, tire marks wide and deliberate, as if whoever did this wanted to leave tracks, wanted to be seen. A message. He looked around. No security cameras. No witnesses. No patrol cars now. Just a quiet silence that screamed. Back at home, Curtis called Devin. "They hit the garden," he said. Devin swore under his breath. "You wanted to come over? Call the news." "No," Curtis replied. "I want you to bring my toolbox." By noon, he was on his knees, sweat pouring from under his cap, splicing irrigation hoses with duct tape and zip ties. He used his cane like a lever to stand, then hammered new wooden stakes into ground with the handle of a trowel. He didn't speak much. But by 1 p.m., word had spread. Ms. Dottie brought sweet tea and 2 pans of cornbread. Her grandson stayed to rake mulch back into place. A high school kid from across town showed up with tomato seedlings. Even Devin rolled in with a trunk full of shovels and a Bluetooth speaker playing old Sam Cooke tracks. The real twist came at 3 o'clock. A white woman parked a silver SUV at the curb. Designer sunglasses. North Millhaven plates. She stepped out holding a tray of muffins. "I saw the videos," she said. "The speech. The mess this morning. I teach biology at the charter school. My students are furious." Curtis didn't flinch. "You here to look or dig?" She smiled. "Both." They handed her a pair of gloves. By sunset, the garden looked rough, but alive again. The beds weren't perfect, but they stood. The hoses hissed back to life. And someone had used scrap cardboard to handwrite a new sign over the entrance. "This is our ground." Curtis stood under it, wiping grime from his brow. Across the street, a familiar cruiser rolled by, slowly. Officer Kershaw in the driver's seat, staring. Curtis stared back. But now he wasn't alone. And just as a patrol car passed, Titan barked. Not from a kennel, from inside a neighbor's yard. Watching, remembering. The garden had barely recovered when the next blow came. It was Tuesday, just after noon. The sky was clear, but the air felt thick, like something was waiting to fall. Curtis was sorting harvest bags on the folding table under the old oak. Tomatoes, peppers, collards, each bag labeled in his careful block print. He was halfway through the list when he heard the gravel crunch. 2 cruisers rolled up. One stopped at the curb. The other pulled halfway into the grass. Curtis recognized the first officer before the door even opened. Officer Landon Kershaw. Tall, pale, that permanent smirk like he knew something you didn't. He adjusted his belt, looked around like he owned the place, then started toward the garden gate. The second officer, a younger guy, stayed behind, hesitant. His nameplate read Ridley. Kershaw gave a tight smile. "Afternoon, Mr. Harper. We've had reports about suspicious activity in this area." Curtis leaned on his cane. "Suspicious like vegetables?" "More like distribution." Kershaw said, scanning the garden beds. "We've received tips that certain substances are being moved through this space." Curtis raised an eyebrow. "Tips from who?" "The squirrels." Kershaw didn't laugh. He stepped into the garden without asking. "This land is city property, temporarily permitted," he said, "which means we have full inspection rights." "You mind?" "I do mind," Curtis replied, "but I bet that won't stop you." Kershaw grinned like he just won something. He made a show of poking around, lifting toolboxes, flipping open crates. Then he walked to the table where the produce bags sat. One by one, he opened them. "Bell peppers," he muttered. "Lettuce." Then he picked up a brown bag marked Ms. Calhoun. His hand dipped into his pocket. Quick, subtle, but not subtle enough. Curtis's eyes narrowed. "Don't." Kershaw ignored him. He turned the bag over. Out spilled tomatoes and a small plastic pouch of white powder. Well, he said, loud enough for the street to hear. "What do we have here?" Curtis didn't blink. "You know exactly what it is, because you planted it." Across the street, a porch door creaked. Miss Dottie's nephew, Theo, stepped outside, phone in hand, already recording. Kershaw glanced up. Saw him. Too late. Officer Ridley stepped forward. "Sir, maybe we should." "Stay in your lane," Kershaw snapped. He turned to Curtis, voice tightening. "Place the cane on the ground. Hands behind your back." Curtis stood tall, even as his knee trembled. "I'm a 72-year-old war veteran with a bad leg. That cane keeps me upright. You take it, you drop me." Kershaw's hand went to his holster. "You're resisting." Curtis didn't move. "I'm standing." The standoff crackled in the heat. From every angle, phones were out, recording. Then came the sound. A bark. Titan's bark. From behind a nearby fence, the shepherd was watching. Silent. Alert. Kershaw's eyes twitched. Curtis tilted his head. "Even your dog knows this is wrong." The bark froze everything. Curtis didn't move. Officer Ridley didn't breathe. Even the cicadas went quiet for a second. Titan stood behind the fence of Miss Dottie's yard, ears forward, hackles raised, but not at Curtis. His eyes were locked on Kershaw. "You brought the dog?" Curtis said quietly. Kershaw didn't answer. He stepped back toward the cruiser and popped the rear door. A chain rattled. A sharp command rang out. "Tighten out." The German shepherd leapt down, body coiled tight, muscles like coiled wire. He stared at Curtis, tongue out, panting steady, waiting. Then came the order that dropped the temperature 10 degrees. "Tighten target." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Curtis didn't flinch. He'd seen this before. Different dog. Same purpose. In another lifetime on another continent. Titan stepped forward. But something shifted. He didn't charge. Didn't snarl. His paws moved slow. His ears twitched. His head tilted. And then he stopped right in front of Curtis. Curtis locked eyes with the dog. And in a voice only Titan could hear, he said, "Hold steady, watch perimeter." It wasn't a guess. It wasn't even a hope. It was memory. And Titan remembered. The shepherd's posture changed instantly, like someone flipped a switch. His tail lowered. His breathing eased. Then, with a deliberate calm that felt like thunder in the silence, he sat, right at Curtis's side, like he belonged there, like he always had. Kershaw's mouth dropped. "What the hell, Titan?" "I said target." Titan didn't move. The phones came up faster than ever. Recordings caught the moment. The badge, the bark, the betrayal. Curtis standing tall, with a war dog at his side. Officer Ridley stepped forward, whispering urgently, "Sir, we need to de-escalate." "I gave an order," Kershaw shouted, his voice cracking. He stormed toward the shepherd, hand reaching for the leash. That's when Titan growled. Low, deep, enough to shake your chest. Kershaw froze mid-step. Across the street, a little girl yelled, "The dog's protecting him." Someone clapped. Then another. The crowd, 20, maybe 30 neighbors by now, burst into noise. "Leave him alone. He's not resisting. That dog knows better than you do." Curtis bent slowly, placing a hand on Titan's back. The shepherd didn't flinch, just pressed in a little closer. "Kershaw," Curtis said, calm and quiet, "I think your leash just ran out." For a long second, all you could hear was the wind. Then Kershaw turned without a word, stomped to the cruiser, and slammed the door so hard it shook dust from the roof. Officer Ridley stood frozen in place, unsure whether to follow or salute. Titan stayed exactly where he was. And Curtis? Curtis stood in the middle of his garden, surrounded by cucumbers and collards, with 100 eyes on him, and a war dog by his side. He didn't say a word, because sometimes dignity doesn't need volume. That night, Curtis couldn't sleep, not from fear, not even from the sharp ache in his knee, but from a memory of a dog sitting at his side like it had done it 100 times before. He sat by the window, the house dim except for a lamp over the kitchen sink. Titan was out back, resting by the fence, calm and alert, like he'd always belonged there, like he remembered. Devin arrived just after sunrise, still in his college hoodie and gym shorts. "You made the morning news," he said, holding up his phone. "They're calling it the sit-down standoff. You and Titan have your own hashtag." Curtis chuckled, dry and low. That dog didn't just sit. He chose. Devin poured coffee and slid into the chair opposite him. "I've been thinking, that command you gave him yesterday, watch perimeter, that's not police K9 lingo, is it?" Curtis looked away. "Not exactly. You used that in Vietnam?" Curtis nodded slowly. "Yeah, part of the old scout dog protocols. Most folks never heard them. They were code phrases, layered with sent cues and contact signals. And Titan," he reacted like he knew. Devin leaned back, quiet for a moment. What if it wasn't coincidence? Before Curtis could answer, the doorbell rang. It was Alyssa Tranlay, a journalist from Liberty Herald, standing on the porch in jeans and boots, holding a notepad and 2 coffees. "I'm not here to exploit you," she said plainly. "I'm here because I got a call from a veterinary behaviorist named Dr. Rachel Kessler. She saw the video, and she has a theory." Curtis raised an eyebrow. This should be good. Alyssa pulled out a photo, an old military file, showing a German shepherd named Athena beside a younger version of Curtis in full uniform. "That was your dog in Vietnam, wasn't it?" Curtis blinked. "Yeah," he said softly. "Athena saved more lives than I can count." Alyssa continued. "Titan's DNA traces back to AK-9 bloodline bred for combat work in the late 1960s. Dr. Kessler believes he may be a direct descendant. She calls it transgenerational scent memory, a controversial theory, but it's been documented. Dogs responding to handlers of their ancestors, as if something sticks." Curtis didn't speak. He didn't need to. Outside, Titan let out a quiet, short bark. Just then, tires screeched outside. A black SUV spun to a stop in front of the house. Doors flew open. Officer Kershaw jumped out, red-faced and wild-eyed. "You've stolen department property," he shouted, hand hovering near his sidearm. "That dog is assigned to me." Curtis stepped out onto the porch, cane firm in hand. "He's not following you anymore," he said calmly, "because he knows what you are." Kershaw advanced, but before his hand could reach to grip his gun, Titan bolted from the backyard, not toward Curtis, not toward Kershaw, but to stand between them. No growling this time, just presence. Still, controlled. That was enough. Kershaw froze. Phones came up again from every porch on the block. Alyssa turned on her mic, and Devin whispered, "This is bigger than just us now, Grandpa." Curtis nodded once. He remembers. Curtis didn't resist, didn't flinch, didn't even blink when Officer Kershaw snapped the cuffs over his wrists on his front porch, right in front of Titan, Devin, and half the neighborhood. The old veteran just stood tall, cane taken from him, dignity intact, until the pain hit. It started in his chest. Subtle, sharp, like a steel hand pressing through his ribs. They called it possession of a controlled substance and interference with police equipment. Kershaw knew the charges were thin, but he had backup this time. Chief Truman himself had signed the order. They were done playing quiet. By the time Curtis reached the holding cell at Millhaven Police Division, his breaths were shallow, shoulders trembling. He asked for his nitroglycerin pills. The booking officer, a rookie too nervous to question anything, took a note and said someone would follow up. They didn't. 3 hours passed. Curtis's vision blurred. His fingers tingled. The pain spread up his arm like frostbite. At hour 4, he collapsed. By the time paramedics arrived, his shirt was soaked in sweat and he was barely conscious. One look at his record. Vietnam vet, cardiac condition, 72 years old, and the EMT cursed under his breath. You didn't give him his meds? The ride to Millhaven Memorial Hospital was fast. The siren screamed, but the damage had already started. Stress-induced myocardial strain. Borderline infarction. The ER team worked fast. IVs, oxygen, monitors. Curtis drifted in and out, each beep of the heart machine keeping time with the rage building outside, because word spread. Fast. Devin posted a video from the porch minutes after the arrest, then another from the ER waiting room. Within hours, hashtags lit up. Hashtag justice for Curtis. Hashtag he stood they struck. Hashtag Titan knew. And then came the avalanche. Veterans groups, civil rights advocates, reporters, former officers, even a retired general tweeted, "A decorated Marine with heart failure and a service dog connection gets cuffed instead of cared for? Millhaven better start lawyering up." Outside the hospital, a crowd gathered, signs, flowers, cameras. A chant started up just after sunset. You mess with one, you answer to all. Inside in room 204, Curtis lay still, hooked up to machines. Devin sat beside him, knuckles white from gripping his grandfather's hand. "You're not alone," he whispered. "You never were." Titan was waiting outside, sitting next to the hospital security guard like he'd been assigned the post. Every now and then his ears twitched. His eyes scanned the crowd. Then he looked up at the window, because something told him Curtis was still fighting. By sunrise, Officer Landon Kershaw was already in motion. He'd been quiet for too long, watching, planning, obsessing. Every headline, every hashtag, every image of Titan sitting loyally beside Curtis Harper burned into his pride like acid. He told himself it wasn't personal, but it was. Because Curtis hadn't just exposed a crooked cop, he'd stolen Kershaw's command. And worse, the damn dog chose him. Kershaw's fingers trembled as he twisted the silencer onto his backup Glock. He wasn't supposed to have the keys anymore, but he'd made a copy back when nobody was paying attention. The target. Crosswind K9 holding center, a gray box of concrete and wire, barely staffed during early hours. He parked behind the building and moved fast. Black hoodie, gloves, dog crate in the trunk. Inside, Titan was in Kennel 4, sitting, quiet, watching the door. Kershaw stepped in and closed the gate behind him. "You had your moment," he muttered. "But moments fade." He raised a weapon. What he didn't see was a second figure slipping through the shadows near the side fence. Curtis had checked himself out of Millhaven Memorial Hospital 3 hours earlier, against medical advice, against a nurse's yelling, against every pulse monitor that screamed when he stood. He didn't care. He'd spent his life walking toward gunfire. Devin had tried to stop him. "You just had a cardiac episode." Curtis's voice didn't rise. "If he kills that dog, it won't be just a loss. It'll be erasure, and I've buried enough of those already." With a hoodie over his hospital gown and his meds stuffed in a brown paper bag, he climbed into the passenger seat. Devin drove. Fast. How do you even know Kershaw's heading there? he asked. Curtis tapped the side of his head. Men like him don't retreat. They erase. Kershaw leveled the gun at Titan's head. One last order. But then the back door slammed open. Curtis stepped into the hallway. Pale, breathing hard, but standing. Kershaw spun. How the hell? You want to finish something? Curtis rasped. Do it face to face, not on a leashed animal. Titan's ears perked. His eyes locked onto Curtis. Then to Kershaw. Curtis stepped closer. You're not after justice. You're after control. And that leash in your hand, it was never yours to hold. Kershaw's voice cracked. You think anyone's going to believe a 72-year-old vet over an officer of the law? They already do, Devin said, stepping behind his grandfather, camera phone recording. Smile, officer. This one's going live. Kershaw panicked. Raise the gun again. But Titan launched. One blur of fur and teeth, straight at Kershaw's arm. The shot went wide, hit concrete. Curtis ducked. Devin dropped the phone. Titan dragged Kershaw down hard, pinning him with a growl so deep the light seemed to shake. Curtis hobbled forward, stood over the man who tried to erase him. Looks like the dog remembers, he said. Now the whole country will too. The department called it a temporary reassignment, but everyone knew better. They were trying to bury Titan. After the takedown at Crosswind, the official story twisted fast. Aggressive behavior, handler conflict, unreliable temperament. Chief Trillman ordered the dog transferred to an out-of-state facility for special evaluation. Translation: get him gone before he testifies without words. But Curtis Elwood Harper wasn't done. He didn't save Titan just to see him disappear into another cold cage. And Landon Kershaw, now suspended, injured, and burning with humiliation, wasn't done either. 2 days later, Titan was scheduled for early morning pickup. Transport route: a rural stretch past the outskirts of town, cutting near an abandoned facility the department hadn't used in years. Fort Benhurst training grounds. Curtis heard the news from Officer Ridley, who'd finally stepped forward with what he knew. That route's wrong, Ridley whispered. Trillman signed off on it. No GPS tracking. No press. If Kershaw wants revenge, that's where it'll happen. Curtis didn't hesitate. He didn't ask permission. He asked Devin for the keys. They reached Fort Benhurst just before dawn. The sky was painted in bruised purple. Curtis stepped out slow, limping hard, breath shallow, but eyes clear as glass. Titan had once again been pulled from Crosswind, this time under false paperwork. The transport van sat idle behind the old compound. The gates were unlocked. Inside, metal echoed. A long hallway, lined with rusted kennels, stretched into shadows. Then came the voice. Should have stayed in your hospital bed. Harper. Kershaw, holding a flashlight in one hand, a gun in the other. And Titan, chained to a pole behind him, growling low. You ruined everything, Kershaw hissed. The speeches, the dog, the damn garden. You think the story ends with you holding the flag? Curtis stepped forward. It ends with truth, and you can't outrun it. Kershaw raised a gun. Truth doesn't matter if there's no one left to speak it. He turned toward Titan, and nothing left to remember it. But Curtis beat him by 1 second. He whistled, short, sharp, a sound that hadn't left his lips since the Nong, 1970. Delta lock course. Titan's head jerked up. Kershaw hesitated. Curtis followed it with 2 words. Guard handler. Titan snapped his chain. The growl turned primal. He launched. The gun fired once, missed. Then everything happened at once. Teeth, shouts, impact. Titan clamped down on Kershaw's forearm, twisting it until the weapon clattered away. The man screamed as he hit the concrete, pinned. Curtis hobbled forward, chest heaving, and stood over him. You should have known, he said coldly. You don't silence legacy. Sirens screamed in the distance. Officer Ridley had called it in. When the backup arrived, Curtis was sitting on a crate, Titan at his feet. Kershaw in cuffs, arm bloodied, screaming about betrayal. No one listened. They'd seen the truth. And this time, it was on record. By the time the dust settled at Fort Benhurst, It was no longer just Curtis Harper's fight. It was Millhaven's reckoning. The footage from Devon's phone, Titan lunging, Kershaw's weapon drawn, Curtis standing unarmed in an abandoned training compound, went viral in under an hour. Then came Officer Ridley's sworn affidavit. He laid it bare. The falsified transfer orders, the erased kennel logs, the backdoor dealings between Chief Trillman and Kershaw. And then came the real shocker. Officer Dana Wilson, the quiet one, the one who always looked away. He came forward. In a recorded interview with Channel 6 News, Wilson said what no one expected to hear. Clean sweep wasn't about safety. It was about pushing people out. We were told to monitor the community garden like it was a drug front. But that man was growing squash and dignity. And I'm done lying. The public exploded. Every major outlet picked up the story. Investigative reports unearthed emails, memos, internal threats. Even a buried complaint from 3 years ago that named Landon Kershaw in an excessive force case, suppressed by Chief Trillman. Within a week, Trillman resigned under federal pressure. 2 days later, Brennan was formally indicted on multiple counts: attempted murder, abuse of authority, falsifying evidence, obstruction of justice. His trial drew national coverage. And in the front row of the courthouse, Curtis, cane in hand, medal on his chest, Titan by his side. In the weeks that followed, Millhaven changed. A civilian oversight board was established. Community leaders, black, white, old, young, were given seats at the table. Curtis didn't want a statue. He didn't need a plaque. But he did get one request approved. The land behind the police division, once slated for demolition, was turned into a new public green space, Harper's Honor Garden, open every morning, free to all. At the ribbon cutting, Curtis didn't say much, just stood in the sun, patted Titan's back, and nodded at the rows of kids planting tomatoes where riot shields once stood. "You okay, Granddad?" Devon asked him that evening, helping him into the passenger seat. Curtis looked out over the garden, the soil, the laughter, the quiet peace. He exhaled slow. "Boy," he said, "we didn't win everything, but we made him look in the mirror." Devon smiled. And what did they see? Curtis chuckled. Depends who was holding the camera. Curtis Elwood Harper didn't bounce back overnight. Healing at his age came slow. But every morning, just after 6:30, he was there, limping across the new brick path at Harper's Honor Garden, Titan trotting faithfully by his side. His hands were no longer steady enough to dig the deep rows himself. That job now belonged to the kids, Devon's classmates, local volunteers, even some former skeptics who once looked at Curtis with suspicion. They all wore the same shirts now, bold white letters. Dignity grows here. Curtis still supervised like a drill sergeant, rows straight, tomatoes upright, and no one touched the okra without gloves. One Thursday afternoon in September, a black sedan pulled up at the garden gate. Out stepped a tall woman in uniform, U.S. Army dress blues. Curtis glanced up. "You lost, Major?" She smiled gently. "Not at all, Sergeant Major Harper. I'm here on behalf of the Department of Defense." Devon stepped closer, confused. Titan sat up, alert. The officer reached into her briefcase and pulled out a velvet box. "For actions of distinguished courage under combat and for continued service to country and community long after the battlefield, the United States presents you with Congressional Medal of Honor." Curtis didn't move. Not at first. Not because he didn't understand, but because for 50 years he'd stopped expecting it. "Most of my team's gone," he finally said, voice low. "No one's left to pin it beside me." The major stepped forward. "You got a whole town watching now, sir, and one very loyal dog." She pinned the medal onto his garden vest, just above a patch that read Harper, USMC. The photo made the front page of 3 national newspapers, not for the medal, but for what came next, because Curtis didn't give a speech. He just raised Titan's paw, shook it once, and whispered, "Told you we finished the mission." Later that fall, schools across South Carolina added a new case study to their civic curriculum, The Garden That Broke the Chain. The unit explored justice, memory, and how one man's quiet stand disrupted a system built on silence. Students wrote essays about courage. One 6th grader wrote, Mr. Harper didn't fight to be famous. He fought so we know who we are. As for Curtis, he watered less, talked more, hosted veterans groups, taught neighborhood kids how to grow squash and spot propaganda. He never used TikTok, but his quotes still went viral. Truth don't need a siren, just someone steady enough to plant it. Titan lived out his days beside him, and every year on Memorial Day, they left a single dog tag in the garden's front plot, buried in fresh soil, not for those who were lost, but for those still looking for a place to heal. And if you're ever in Millhaven, stop by Harper's Garden. You'll find history there, and if you listen closely enough, you might hear the sound of a whistle and paws hitting earth. Still guarding, still growing, still free,